Hello and welcome back to another edition of the Osceola's Reeling Them In Recruiting Report. And I am joined as always by Osceola recruiting analyst Charles Fishbein, and we have a very special guest today, FSU's General Manager of Personnel, Darrick Yray, is joining us. Darrick, welcome.
Appreciate you all having me on, Fish and Pat, and look forward to this.
Yeah, well, listen, obviously when you were hired by Florida State, we were not yet associated with a recruiting network. We were kind of independent website, standalone website. We were not associated with rivals, did not do as much recruiting as obviously we're doing now. And obviously when you were hired, I was in Atlanta working a indoor pro football league job. So we had not got a chance to talk to you. So first of all, thanks for taking the time out. We know this is a very busy time of year for you guys. You guys have kids on campus just about every day during the spring. Just wanted to bring you on, let our subscribers get to know a little bit more about you, our viewers. And really, Darrick, want to just, kind of learn a little bit more about your background in football, how you got to Florida State.
Sure. I'm blessed to be here and all roads that have leading there, and just been so lucky in my career to be surrounded by great people that were willing to help me and, willing to extend a hand, kind of mentor and teach me different things. And there's been so many folks who have been influential in my career, and so thankful for those relationships and just for them to be able to pay it forward. And it's the same reason I believe what I believe now of who I get to work with every single day, to as much as I could pour into everyone around me to help them better themselves as well, because you're only as strong as your team.
Well, speaking about the strength of that team, obviously you were awarded the Player Personnel Director of the Year by FootballScoop.com, and obviously they are a site that's dedicated to the coverage of. They know people all over the country. They're very tuned in to what's going on in college football. Number one, congratulations on that. And what did it mean to you and the program to be recognized by Football Scoop?
Yeah, honored for the award and grateful for it. No question, but I see it as a staff award. And, I told our group the day that it was announced and that it happened, that I was so thankful to work with them every day and, to help how I can best serve and, serve our program. But I do see it as a staff award, and not just even a recruiting personnel or scouting staff award, right? A staff-wide award, right? Because it's a reflection of everything that every single one of us, the sacrifices that we pour in every single day. It's not an individual award, in my opinion. There's so much that goes into it, from, the 20 full-time staff that we have in recruiting personnel or scouting, or, the 60 students that constantly sacrifice their weekends to make sure that those experiences are great when young men walk on campus, to our coaching staff, our graduate assistants, our analysts, sports medicine, everyone who's involved with the program. That's a reflection of that award and a reflection of the success that we had on the field and the roster that we put together. But it takes all working on the same page in order to make that work.
Yep. Well, listen, y'all have, the one thing that Fish and I have always talked about, and Osceola's talked about, the one thing you guys do is put in a tremendous amount of work in recruiting. Somebody asked me the other day about the recruiting class, and I said, listen, with as many ball games as Florida State's going to win, as much effort that they put into recruiting, you can rest assured they're going to have another great class. So you guys do put in a lot of work, and we see you guys out there every weekend doing it. And you're right, it does take a team, but congratulations on the personal recognition and the recognition for the program. Now, listen, you're I think one of the things that Florida State fans like to find out is how coaches and support staff end up at Florida State. We talk a lot. When we interview former players, it's always interesting to get their path to Florida State. Now, you're kind of a West Coast guy. Went to Fresno State, worked at Oregon State, worked in the CFL for a little bit. What was your path to Florida State and Mike Norvell?
Yeah, as Coach Norvell and I first met in 2016, it's funny. I was speaking to a class the other evening, and I told them the story. Kind of my bucket list had always been to attend a championship at every major level of sport. And so I worked this mega camp in 2016 that we had to go to at Mary Hardin Baylor, partnered with Oklahoma State. And I had to give up Game 3 Stanley Cup final tickets for the Sharks and the Penguins. And that's the one that I'm missing currently still. So been to everything else. But, it just so happened on that weekend that I met Mike Norvell. And that road trips, those old satellite camp rules, we traveled. There's 5 camps, I think, in 4 days that we did, starting up in Mary Hardin, Baylor, working all the way down to San Antonio, to Houston, up to Tyler, to Dallas, kind of getting the full Texas Triangle approach there. And, I was lucky enough, we got a mutual connection, Marcus Woodson, him and I were together at Fresno State, had introduced me at that time to Coach Norvell, and, knew who each other were from that point forward, but not necessarily like kept in contact. And then we had another mutual friend that made the connection while I was at Oregon State, and he had reached out and asked, hey, there's this opening that they're going to create at Florida State, and this is what they're going to try to do. Would you have any interest? And I was like, I would. I'd have interest, but at the same time, I'm not looking to just jump to anything just because I want to jump because of a logo or, pay or anything. I believe in being happy where you are presently. And we had a great thing going there at Oregon State with Jonathan. And so the first time I got on the phone with Coach Norvell, and I was like, oh yeah, like this is one I want to go after. Just visions aligned and kind of energy matched and everything in between. I was like, I want this one. And I'd spent 9 hours of my life in the state of Florida, 10 hours of my life before arriving here. I'd never been to Tallahassee and came here sight unseen. And, one of the better decisions that I've made in my life.
Well, listen, one of the better decisions you made, I think you started in Tallahassee in February of 2022, which is much better than showing up in July or August when the summer heat. At least you gives you a little chance to build up to it, because I'm sure that was a shock to your system if you'd never been to Florida or Tallahassee.
Yeah, it was the weather. The weather changing was a little bit. My wife had spent time at the University of Kentucky, so I'm familiar with the South, and that was part of it too. She always wanted to get. She's, hey, if we can ever get to the South, let's try to do so. And we're looking. I do not recommend. She was 4 months pregnant at the time. Moving cross country with a pregnant wife, but she was a trooper in how she did it and approached it and handled all those things that needed to be.
Well, that's the football life, and you got to, football wives are probably every bit as strong as their husbands when it comes to that kind of thing. They actually, they make it possible. There's no doubt for you guys to do what you do. So, listen, you mentioned that when you got contacted by Florida State, it was about them creating a position they did not have. Over the last 10 years, college football's changed a lot. And, it used to be that the recruiting coordinator was an on-field coach. And, of course, you guys still have that with David Johnson. But it seems like with the advent of not only the transfer portal, but the NIL and all that goes along with that, that you're starting to see more programs have positions like yours where you have somebody that is the general manager of player personnel, and obviously roster addition, retention, however you want to term it. Just talk to us about why Florida State and Mike decided to create this position that you are now filling, and kind of your major areas of responsibility.
Yeah, I think if you look around the landscape of what, recruiting, personnel, and retention has become, just the ability to have the dedicated support, but also the expansion of everything that has been off the field. There's a lot of moving parts in this, and, for what coach is so great at anything that he does, but where is it best for him to spend the majority of his time? And, with him, how can we free him up and make sure he can maximize all of that time, and to make sure there's people around him that he trusts. And so my day-to-day, my responsibilities are making sure we have the best roster at all times at Florida State. I mean, that's the simplest way to put it. We're always going to look at ways that we can improve that, looking at creative ways of whether it become from, junior college, high school, transfer portal, a walk-on program, current students on campus, whoever it may be. If they're a player and they have eligibility left, we're going to look at trying to add them to the roster if we think they improve that at some level. But at the same level, then the other side of it is, once you've identified those folks, and if they're a freshman, sophomore, junior, you want to make sure you're retaining those on the roster as well. And so that is an everyday process, working hand to hand with all of the parties that are involved, from our sports medicine staff, our strength staff, obviously our scouting and our personnel group, but just to make sure that it is ever changing and there's no same story that's going to happen the next day. And how can you adjust in that way of anticipation and planning as much as you can?
When you look at roster management, though, do you guys have a set number of what you look for from the high school ranks, the portal, the JUCO, where you're going to put those numbers? Do you have a set number, or do you guys just decide basically different times?
Yeah, the set number written in sand, I guess is probably the best way. And I think you look at each individual situation as its own. And I say that, like, I think where people fail, and especially this is what's changed probably in my opinion the most in the last 5 years, is you used to go in and be like, okay, here's my blueprint, here's where I want to be scholarship wise, here's what I'm trying to sign in this year's class, and let's go. And that was great when you were trying to build a roster, and you were there, here's my 2-year, 3-year, 4-year plan. Now to me what's changed is, hey, how can we build the best roster for this year? What's going to help us win this year? And at the same time, having some ability to look through, okay, we want to get the best players regardless of where they come from, right? It's not just the transfer portal. It's not just junior college. It's not just high school. How can we assemble the best roster for the 2024 Florida State Seminoles? And at the same time, now we're recruiting and looking a year ahead and say, okay, out of high school, we want to get the best players. It's
When
not
you,
just
yeah. Now, one thing I wanted to follow up on that too is when you're recruiting a kid now, it's kind of changed. You may have a kid that comes in, he's high up on your board, but maybe he's not telling you what you really want to hear. But how much of that you still recruit that kid, even maybe he commits to another school on signing day? How much you don't get upset anymore like maybe you used to, because there's still that chance of him entering the portal. How much of that do you do and with the kids that you're recruiting now?
It's a mixed bag. I think you have to follow the signs and follow the information, and we're in the business of collecting information and making sure that we have as many facts out there to make those informed decisions of, hey, where are the resources, and is it worth pouring these resources into an individual, and is it a true fight? What are people saying around them? And a lot of young men that are in there, right, wrong, or indifferent, they're afraid to have direct conversations in the sense of just telling people no, and so they'll take the road of, okay, yeah, you're not out of it, and just following the signs that are around. But at the same time, if you have other information, the biggest power you have is to walk away and not pour those resources in and move on to the next. But that's the balancing act of it, of, hey, we're all competitive in this nature, and I'm going to fight to the very last ounce. But you just need to make sure that the information you're getting on the outside is pointing you in the direction that, yeah, it's worth the fight.
Well, speaking of pulling in a lot of different directions, you guys are pulling in a lot of different directions. You're working the portal at the same time you're working high school kids. You're getting ready for bowl games. All of that kind of thing happens in December, January area. It's created a lot of conversation and led to. We've already started to see some reform on that. They've moved the early national signing day up to the first, I think, Wednesday in December. I believe it's December 4th, which is about 16 days earlier than it was last year, 2 weeks basically. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think it was good for the sport? Because now you're not dealing with the portal guys necessarily. I mean, portal guys at the same time you're dealing with the high school kids. You think that was a good thing?
I mean, it would be interesting to see how this year works out with the date, and especially with the expansion of the CFP, going to the amount of teams. And I think that's the main reason they moved it up. I don't think it has anything really to do with, I think they're masking it as the transfer portal, a little bit with high school recruiting and signing that class. But the rules are going to be what the rules are going to be, and
right.
We'll adjust and adapt and make the best of those situations of things we can't control. And just tell us when the game starts and put the ball down. Let's go.
Yep.
A follow-up on question. Would you rather see maybe them push it back, maybe even all the way to like August before the season, and then have one maybe in February, and just get rid of the December signing period?
I think they're interesting conversations regardless. I think personally, I'd probably like to see them sign whenever. And so if you're ready to sign, if you've offered a scholarship, you can sign right then once you've taken an official visit, is what I would do. I think the fear of moving it up in summer, we're having this conversation with a couple others in the field. Like, we're in the most developmental sport that there is. And a lot of times, okay, if we move it up into the summer, you're taking away maybe at least a quarter of their varsity playing experience, a third or a half, depending upon how many years they played in varsity. And you're making a decision off of missing at least 25% of their experience in varsity football. I think that's scary in a developmental sport, in my opinion. I think it leads to more misses. And so that's the other side of the coin. But I think for some level of accountability with the way the offers are going now and, offering to recruit, I just believe that, if you're going to offer a young man, he should have the opportunity to sign right then and there.
Yeah. Now, is there any? Obviously, we've heard one of the reasons that guys like Nick Saban have decided to move on, and with probably a lot of this has to do with why part of the reason Jim Harbaugh went to the NFL, other than he wants to win a Super Bowl like his brother. But is there any other type of guardrails or reform that you would like to see, whether it be NIL or portal? I mean, obviously, you've talked a little bit about early National Signing Day. I just wish they'd move it back to the first Wednesday in February like the old days, and that would give you guys plenty of time to evaluate. You wouldn't miss as many, as you said. You kind of overlook some guys that develop late in their senior year, and you guys probably have guys on your roster that if they had been signed early, or if you signed everybody early in August, you would have missed out on some of those guys who, especially offensive and defensive linemen, who tend to develop late. But yeah, was there any reform that you would like to see, or guardrails that you would like to see put on NIL or the portal?
Yeah, I mean, I think where it's going, I mean, there's, guardrails and whatever the rules are going to be. There's a lot of others in the room that are making those decisions, and whatever they're going to be, we're going to follow to the best of our ability and make sure we're staying compliant. I do think big changes are coming. It'll be interesting to see where college football is, a couple years from now, from 5 years from now, with what's in the courts and, the unionization, collective bargaining agreements and employment contracts. I think we're headed down a road that eventually there probably is going to be some sort of revenue sharing model, which is going to, undo the current model of collegiate athletics as a whole. But whatever, something I'm not necessarily in control in. And so whenever that does happen and whenever I'm asked for feedback, I'll make sure that I give my opinion then.
Darrick, most people think that we brought up NIL. Most people think when you're recruiting a kid that today they just go to the highest bidder. When you're recruiting a kid, how much of it, do they come in and they just say, hey, NIL, I want this, I want that? Or do you still look for other qualities in that kid, hoping that there's more things important than just getting a payday? Are these prospects all just about NIL, or do these families do care about what university they go to, a comfort level, other things than just getting paid?
Yeah, I think it's a case-by-case basis. Each individual has their own situation. I think more times than not, they're not just choosing a university because of money. There are some of those cases that do exist, but every situation for that person's different of what's out there. And that's where I think there's a lot of frustration in college football right now, is just the lack of transparency of, everything that is there. And, we work so long, and everyone who's had college football experience for so long, like, hey, make sure boosters never talk to individuals that you're recruiting. And now with collectives here, we've allowed boosters to talk to recruits. I mean, and so when you sit back and think of everything what you've been taught for 100 years, in the matter of 2 years, you've gone a complete 180 to head in opposite direction. It's an interesting space right now, but we're going to make the best of it and attack. And thankful for the Battle's End and what they've provided, and just that group to allow us to retain and recruit at a top tier level. And because it takes everyone, and it is a new age of college football, and it's not going away. But make no mistake, this has been this has been needed for a long time, because I do think the players for a long time have deserved to, be paid, have deserved to maximize their name, image, and likeness. And, for what the money and they're bringing into universities, it's time.
Yep. I agree with you on that. Now, listen, I think that I agree. I thought Fish and I have talked about this several times, and Jim Harbaugh is probably one of the first coaches that brought it up. I think you're right. I think this is going to collective bargaining at some point, and it is going to be interesting to see. We've seen what the changes have been in college football just over the last 10 years. I'm kind of like you. I can't wait to see what college football looks like in 5 more years from now. Let's kind of walk us through the portal process. You guys have been very successful. Number one, why do you think you guys have had the success that you have had in the portal, where you've been able to bring in, guys that have turned into some of the best players in college football through the portal? Obviously, you developed some from out of high school, but everybody seems, and you talk about not going away. The portal's not going away. You hear a lot of people say, "Well, they signed somebody out of the portal." Well, that's That's how business is done now. How are you guys so successful in the portal? Why do you think that is? And then just kind of walk us through y'all's portal process from the time that you guys learn that someone's in the portal to the time they end up at Florida State.
Yeah, the success in the portal, it starts and stops with Coach Norvell, and just his ability to, be able to be the first one that is reaching out, and from there forth, we want to make sure that in advance of certain things, we're collecting as much information as we can, so we can, big picture of it is, that 1,000-piece puzzle that each individual recruit is, or each prospect, whatever they may be. How can we turn over as many of those pieces to make those informed decisions and just go off that? You're never going to be 100%, but excuse me, as much as you can limit that risk of collecting all of those things. The first reason someone goes in the portal, well, why are they transferring? Is it fit? What's the character reference from that school they're going to say? Most of the times, if a guy's leaving a school, you're not going to get great character references. So digging into that further. What are high school coaches, 7-on-7 coaches, trainers, people around the program, maybe NFL personnel who's gone in there, maybe information that they have. And so there's not a person that we won't collect information from. We're just going to try to collect it all and make decisions from there. But fit is the most important thing for us, how they're going to fit in the locker room. What are they culture-wise? Are they willing to work? If you're not willing to work, don't come to this program. And Coach will talk about all the time, because we're going to work, and we're absolutely going to, the built from in the weight room with Coach Storms, from on the field with our coaching staff, to off the field academically, the three areas that we want them to grow in, academically, socially, and athletically. I just think you point at it, are they going to be a fit at Florida State and in Tallahassee? And so from there, talent and obviously measurables and everything that you want to attract, are they going to fit from an athletic profile as well? And then making the decision. But I think everyone looks at the portal, you want to it's the old John Wooden quote of be quick, but don't hurry.
Right.
And so be quick to recruit, but don't be in a hurry to take, if that makes sense. And so always being recruiting, and obviously that could happen in 24 hours. That can happen in 48, 72 to a week to 2 weeks, but sometimes even a month. But you're never going to stop collecting information or evaluating that prospect, even if you have it, extended a hand to offer, whatever that may be. But the biggest power in this, in my opinion, is just the ability to walk away. If you get some bad information, or you do have a bad feeling, like a bad blackjack table, just walk away.
Darrick, you come from Oregon State. You actually had experience before the portal transfer. You dealt with transfers, JUCO kids before the portal. How much of an influence has you having that experience dealing with this? How much of an influence has that on your recruit? How you're recruiting kids at Florida State now, and what you guys do day to day.
Yeah, obviously, coming from Oregon State, a lot of experience was learned there and flipping a roster. And when Jonathan Smith got there, we did take a lot in the portal. And I mean, we had some advantages that were built in there, being a quarter school. And so there was a couple guys we even took who had, played for other universities in the first couple of weeks, and were able to transfer to Oregon State and sit out and use that as their redshirt year and their year of residence. But we wanted to always, the quickest way to upgrade is with proven players, right? And what is known, and it's unknown heavens versus known hells, and that adage. And that's where I believe the transfer. But I think the other side of the transfer portal that no one really talks about is the transfer portal's allowed accountability too for coaches.
Yeah.
And when I say that is, well, when you're coming out of high school and you're telling a recruit, hey, it's going to be this, this, and this. Well, now the transfer portal's allowed. He didn't exactly follow through, or that program didn't exactly follow through on whatever that may have been, that promise. Well, now I can just go in the portal. So that's allowed accountability. And so for us to be success in the way that we approach recruiting, we're going to, that family-like atmosphere, being genuine. A lot of times when guys are in the portal, they've been through a lot of that song and dance. And so they come to Florida State, or they're on the phone with us for the first time, and it feels like, no, they're real. Like, I understand what this is now. And so I think that's helped us and been beneficial.
Well, obviously, we talked about before we got started, Florida State is back to being a nationally recognized program. You guys have done an excellent job taking it from what you guys took over in 2020 to what you guys have built it into today. But one of the things that has happened is you guys see, at least if you go back and look at where you've signed kids from. It looks like you guys are signing more kids closer to from geographically closer to Tallahassee than you have in the previous. Every year it seems like a bigger percentage comes closer than it has the year before. Is that by design that you guys want to try to recruit from the state of Florida and the Southeast as much as you can? And with winning, you guys do have the capability of going and recruiting all over the country. We've seen you guys do it out in California with Blake Nicholson, and there's other examples out of the portal with Trey Benson and those kind of things. Is there a design, though, that you guys have is it a priority to sign kids close to Tallahassee, or how do you manage that?
Obviously, you want to win in your surrounding area and people who are familiar with you, just for the ease of travel for them and their families to come to games. At the same time, wherever we believe that there's going to be a fit, we're going to go after that player, regardless if they're in the continental United States. If they claim maybe Tonga, Samoa, Australia, China, India, it doesn't matter to us. We've looked in Europe for different individuals, guys who have, claimed Sweden or Norway or England, wherever it may be, we're going to go after the best fit where we think is Florida State. Now, with that being said, I think you want to look at predominantly where can you get the best bang for your buck, in the sense of where are the best players coming from. And it's no secret that the Southeast has the best players. So for us, we want to be in a good amount of mileage radius around Tallahassee. And there's a lot of areas of schools and kids that we can attract. And in that is that 1 day drive. Can they get to Tallahassee with a 1 day drive?
Hey, I got a question for you. That's all right. So I know during the peak recruiting season, I believe December and January, you're traveling a lot with Mike on the plane to see kids. I don't think people understand kind of what those days are like. Can you kind of give us, when you guys are hopping around the United States, Florida, wherever, can you kind of explain to people, Mike has kind of mentioned it to us a couple times outside the building about, where you guys have been and, how busy you guys are. Can you kind of explain what one of those days is like, as far as where you guys are going, how many hours you're working, how, sleeping on the plane between visits?
Yeah. A lot of times, they're early mornings and late nights. I think, especially in December with all of the moving pieces, I think the average time we usually got to a hotel was, after midnight, sometime, 1 a.m. for 2 straight weeks. And a lot of times starting those days at, 5:30, 6 a.m. And there's a lot of driving, there's a lot of flying. And sometimes there's some adversity that you have to respond to as well, as far as things that are outside your control, whether they be weather or errors. There was a week in there, I think we hit 9 states in 5 days.
Yeah.
And so 9 states in 5 days, well, that's not, but a lot of times there's, 7 to 8 to 9 school visits too within those days. And, there might be a basketball game to follow. And, if you're on the helicopter makes things efficient, but you can't put a helicopter through a drive-through.
You can.
Some of the ease of travel and the ease of logistics that make things easier, that make it a little harder on doing things. But Coach does a great job of balancing and managing. And, Chuck Canner, who really plans the logistics daily on all of those things, he's phenomenal at it, and making sure that we're hitting everywhere we need to hit. And I'm just a chauffeur on those weekends, because I'm not allowed to go into schools and stay in there. But the conversations that happen in between those visits and making sure the coaches.
I was getting ready to say, there's a little bit more than chauffeur duties involved in those trips, because you're sitting next to the head coach. There's a lot of questions to answer. And you're probably putting him on the phone with the next kid as soon as he gets in. All right, so listen, we hear you've talked culture a lot, and we hear about culture. Everybody talks about it, but one of the things that I think you guys do a great job of in the 3 years we've actually been covering recruiting on a daily basis since we joined Rivals, is we hear kids coming out of these visits, official visits, it really doesn't matter. They talk about the feeling of family and brotherhood that you guys put upon them. We've heard several guys that we interviewed coming out of Legacy Weekend talking about family, brotherhood. It seems to be repetitive, whether you guys are serious about a kid or just on the fringes and haven't made your mind. Every kid comes out just about to a man, and talks about the family feel. How do you guys create that? Because it's hard to do each and every weekend. I mean, but it certainly seems like you guys put a personal feel to this. It's not just a car wash experience when they come for visits. How do you guys establish that? Because I've heard it for now 3 years.
Yeah, I just think you really want to be who you are. And it doesn't need to be a Hollywood green screen. It doesn't need to be a movie production. And, when a young man walks in, be yourself. There's some belief out there, that, hey, you can, fake and be something different. And I don't believe that. Like, I look back when we were all teenagers, like, we could see when people were being fake. We could see when people weren't being real. And so these guys that we're all recruiting are smarter than we give a lot of people credit for. And, so they can see when it's not authentic and genuine. And at the same time, again, with the transfer portal, now when they come in here and if it's totally different, you're gonna have a hard time retaining that player. And so you need to put it all out there and be exactly what it is from day one.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, listen, I think it's, I just, every time we talk to, it's impressed me that you guys have been able to do that, and obviously it's more important that you impress the kid. But listen, you don't hear that. I go back and research a lot of these kids after they've taken visits elsewhere and read their quotes, and you don't hear family as much as you do when they visit Florida State. So just want to mention that because I do think you guys do a great job of that. Fish, you got any more questions for Darrick?
Nah, man, he did a great job, to be honest with you. I don't want to he deals with me enough, so.
Yeah, well, and Darrick, we appreciate you, and we'd love to have you back on sometime, but appreciate you giving us 30 minutes out of your day to kind of introduce you to Osceola's subscribers, listeners, viewers, whether it be on our site or on our YouTube channel. But look forward to I guess I'll see you today because it's closed, but we will see you next week after practice one day.
Yes, sir. Look forward to it. I appreciate you guys taking the time, and have a great day and have a great Easter.
Your Seminoles kick off the 2024 football season in Dublin, Ireland, as they face the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets in the Aer Lingus College Football Classic. Join fellow Florida State fans on a trip you won't soon forget. Game tickets for the August 24th matchup are now available through Florida State Athletics Ticket Office and selling fast. Visit Seminoles2Ireland.com. That's Seminoles, the number 2, Ireland.com. And go Noles!